I met her on our first coaching session. She desperately wanted to know what she needed to do to keep things moving forward with her guy. See, she had already decided that he was the one for her. Everything lined up. He was tall, he was attractive, he was smart, funny, successful. He was the perfect complement to her own successful career. He completed this picture for her. Well, she came to me wanting to make sure that she didn't mess up this time. This was her guy, and she was ready for him to commit to her. The problem was really easy to spot from the very beginning. She had checked her boxes and decided that this was her guy before she knew him well enough to know if she was actually even compatible with him. See, you can't determine someone is your guy and press forward, ignoring all the red flags and minimizing any real problems simply because he checked those boxes before you actually get to know the real him. Because it changes you. It causes you to stop looking at who he is objectively and how he treats you, and turns the focus to you doing whatever you can to convince him to stay with you, to keep wanting you, to fall deeply, madly in love with you. Even if he's not right for you, even if you're getting new information from him that shows he's not compatible with you. Well, what do? We ignore it, and we keep going forward with him, not wanting to acknowledge the actual reality of what we're seeing from him, but focusing instead on the idea of him. We can't admit to ourselves that it's only the idea of him that's compatible with us, not the real him that he's revealing himself to be. Well, my client found herself in a quandary. All she wanted was to know what to do to make him commit to her, to keep choosing her, to keep moving the relationship forward. But all she was doing was pushing him away by her insecure behavior that caused her to chase him, to pursue him, to try desperately to keep him happy with her, all the while wondering why he wasn't doing all of this with her on his own. Well, we talked about giving him space, and she would try, but then she would get too scared that he would never come back, so she'd reach out again to him. And sometimes he'd respond, but other times he wouldn't. Sound familiar? She never knew where she stood with him. My entire time with her was spent showing her the real him, taking the behaviors that she would tell me about and putting them into a perspective in the hopes that she would finally recognize that the man she had fallen in love with and was insisting was the perfect guy for her was only a figment of her imagination and not who he was actually showing her in reality to be. No, he wasn't that guy. He had checked some really important boxes to her in the beginning that led her to believe that everything else was going to fall into place and confirm for her that he was the one for her. But what she was doing was discarding any information that didn't conform to what she had determined were her beliefs about him. She couldn't see this. She was in so deep. Years of being conditioned to look at certain characteristics of someone and disregard all the rest precipitated this move to not being able to see the bigger picture. Those things that didn't confirm what she wanted so badly to believe. She felt like she was out of time. See, she didn't want to start again. She didn't want to start with anyone new. She was going to make him commit to her. And this woman, she was beautiful, successful, she was intelligent, she was kind, loving, caring. She had determined that she was the perfect woman for him and he for her. And all she just needed to do was show him this more convincingly to complete his commitment to her. The problem was, the more she got to know him, the more he was showing her that he actually wasn't the one for her. He wasn't on the same page as her. He wasn't compatible with her in all the ways that matter going forward. But she had lost her objectivity to be able to see this because she'd rushed ahead. So all she was doing now was looking for ways to confirm his status as the one for her without looking at the reality that he was showing her instead. The few things he did that were good boyfriend behavior kept her justifying in spite of overwhelming other behaviors that were anything but good boyfriend behaviors. Like, I remember even on their ski getaway to the mountains, her hopes for what was going to be this romantic getaway that would cement their relationship, it turned into, as she retold it to me when she got back, it turned into him being annoyed with her when their expectations conflicted with reality. I was the only one with enough objectivity to see this. To her, they were perfect for each other. She just had to stop backtracking into who she was becoming again. My goal became to help her separate reality from the fantasy that she'd created in her own mind of what he was going to become again. If she could only figure out how to be as good as she had been in the beginning, to make him change back to how she remembered him. The work became all hers. And how familiar is that? She had to stop caring so deeply for him. She was doing all the work. She had to learn to detach from him so she could actually see him. She had to try to let him come to her instead of letting her anxieties get the better of her, so that what he was doing and what he was thinking wasn't always on her mind. Until on one of our calls, when he had done something that finally led her to see him for who he really was and had been all along, except for the man that she had fallen in love with in the very, very beginning, who checked all those boxes for her simply because he was on his best behavior. I mean, that's the reality. He was on his best behavior before winning her over. Well, she realized finally that something got through. She was the only one doing all this work. She wasn't happy. She wasn't content. She wasn't having any part of fun, and worse, she was lonelier in this relationship with him than she'd ever been on her own. This wasn't the way that she imagined a relationship ever being. She wanted to be pursued, to be loved, and even when she created some distance and she gave him some space, nothing changed. He was still only as available to her as he was willing to be, and his friends, his work, the whole rest of his life, it always came first. Well, ironically, he was happy. He was content. He was having fun. She had a conversation with him that night. For the first time since they'd been together, she told him what she could finally say out loud, what she could finally admit to herself. They were on 2 different pages. She wasn't who he wanted. And when she finally removed the blinders of loneliness and fear, she realized that he wasn't anything more than the promises and expectations the real him had never been able to live up to. She ended it that night. Not because she wanted to, but like so many of us, because she had to. Now, did it make it hurt any less? No. It still broke her heart. Did she go back and forth a few times more with him, hoping they could try again and finding out nothing had changed? Yeah, because we're always going to try again if we have the chance to prove ourselves wrong. But here's where the good news comes in. This isn't where her story ends. I'm really happy to say that today she's with someone who makes her happy, who's grounded in reality, who she never has to wonder where she stands with him or how to get him to go back to who he used to be in the beginning. They're actually compatible. They're on the same page. They're committed to each other. And she would never, ever have met him if she was one of the other women whose emails show up in my inbox with the stories of just how many years they've lived their lives waiting for someone to change back. Years, decades, working on themselves, always, and spending so much time and energy thinking about what he's thinking, what he's doing, instead of living a full life for themselves. You can have both, beautiful. You can have a friend and a lover. The in-between guy that you've been searching your whole life for. I see it all the time. I hear about it all the time. But you can't have that with the wrong guy. Not with someone you aren't truly compatible with. Not with the guy that you have to pretend with. And never ever with the guy who checked all the boxes, all the right boxes in the beginning that has you working backwards to prove yourself right. The first question you have to ask yourself about your guy who won't commit, are you absolutely sure that he's the one you actually want to commit to? And if you're not sure, I can give you a simple test to know if it's real love. Watch this video next, and I'll show you what it is. See you soon, beautiful.